Mr. Bromhead, Kejiwayo is coming with 2 impies to destroy you.
You must talk to Lieutenant Chard, Mr. Witt. He commands here. Margareta?
Mr. Chard, I'm ready to take away your sick and wounded. Please supply the wagons. Daughter, tell the men in the hospital to get ready.
One moment, Miss Margareta. Mr. Witt, I don't suppose you hold the Queen's commission.
I am a man of peace, sir.
Then allow a Queen's officer to give orders to her soldiers. Now, how do you know what Kejiwayo is doing?
We have just come from his kraal, sir. He's a member of my parish.
Your parish? Are you sure you're on the right side of the river, Mr. Witt?
I am here to do my duty. I expect your cooperation.
What's our strength?
7 officers, including surgeon, commissaries, and so on. Oh, and Ardendorf now, I suppose. Wounded and sick, 36. Fit for duty, 97. And about 14 native levies. Not much of an army for you.
There are 4,000 Zulus coming against you. You must abandon this mission.
Mr. Chard?
Ardendorf sent his trooper to Haltmacher. There's a relief column there, isn't there? Cavalry?
There was, 3 days ago.
Mr. Bromhead, issue all our walking wounded with arms and ammunition.
You will all be killed like those this morning. And now the sick in their beds, all of you.
I don't think so, Mr. Witt. The army doesn't like more than one disaster in a day.
Looks bad in the newspapers and upset civilians at their breakfast.
Sir.
Welcome, everyone, to a deep dive into the life of a true cinematic titan, a man whose very essence was forged in the rugged, unyielding landscape of industrial Wales, and who, against all odds, carved out a legacy that reshaped British cinema and beyond. Today, we're talking about Sir Stanley Baker, a name that might not immediately jump to mind for every film buff, but whose impact on the silver screen, on the portrayal of masculinity, and on the very structure of independent television is nothing short of monumental. His story isn't just about an actor who played tough guys, it's about a man who was tough, who embodied the grit and resilience of his origins, and who used that authentic power to challenge the conventions of his time. We're going to journey through his remarkable life, from the coal-dusted valleys of his birth to the dazzling heights of Hollywood co-productions, and the ultimate triumph of his creative vision. So, settle in, because this is a story of determination, talent, and a relentless pursuit of authenticity. Let's begin, as all good stories do, at the beginning, in the Rhondda Valley. Imagine, if you will, a place where the air itself was thick with the dust of coal, where the landscape was scarred by the relentless pursuit of black gold, and where survival wasn't a given, but a daily battle. This was Ferndale, Glamorgan, Wales, in 1928, the birthplace of William Stanley Baker. His father, John Henry Baker, was a coal miner, a man whose days were spent in the dark, cramped veins of the earth, extracting the very fuel that powered a nation, but at a terrible personal cost. The physical toll of this life was a constant, stark reality for young Stanley. His father suffered a devastating accident underground, losing a leg to the unforgiving machinery of the mine. This wasn't just a personal tragedy. It plunged the family into severe financial hardship, forcing them onto a meager existence of unemployment benefits and compensation. But here's where the story of Stanley Baker truly begins to take shape. Despite his physical ruin, John Henry Baker maintained a fierce, stoic dignity, a quiet resilience that his son would absorb deep into his being. This wasn't a man who complained. He was a man who endured. And on the other side of that coin was Elizabeth Sarah Baker, Stanley's mother, the emotional anchor of the home. She managed the household with an iron will and a resourcefulness that was common among the valley women of that era. They were the backbone, the silent strength that kept families afloat in an often brutal world. Stanley was the youngest of 3 children, growing up in a modest, terraced miner's cottage. Luxury was a foreign concept here. Their home was heated by a single coal grate, a stark reminder of the industry that defined their lives. But what they lacked in material wealth, they made up for in other, equally valuable currencies. Literacy and oral expression were highly prized. The Rhondda wasn't just a place of industry. It was a crucible of political radicalism, fervent chapel preaching, and of course, rugby football. These weren't just pastimes, they were pillars of community life, all demanding vocal power, physical presence, and an unshakable sense of identity. Young Stanley, as you might imagine, was rough-hewn, aggressive, and fiercely competitive. He roamed the scarred hillsides, engaged in street battles with rival gangs, a familiar rite of passage in many working-class communities, and developed a thick, protective skin, both literally and figuratively. To an outsider, the path for young Stanley seemed clear. Either follow his father into the pits despite the inherent dangers, or join the local dole queue, a grim reality for many. He wasn't an academic child. The traditional classroom felt restrictive to his restless energy. But here's the crucial insight. He possessed an innate raw intelligence and an incredibly observant eye. He watched the men of the valley. He cataloged their rolling, heavy-shouldered gaits, the way they leaned against brick walls under the perpetual Welsh drizzle, the deep, resonant cadence of their voices, and the simmering anger of a working class exploited by distant industrial barons. This wasn't just passive observation. It was a subconscious absorption of human behavior, a masterclass in character study that would later become the bedrock of his revolutionary acting style. He was, in effect, performing method acting before he even knew what acting was. The trajectory of Baker's life, however, was about to be permanently altered by a single individual. It happened when he entered Ferndale Council School, and there he met Glyn Morse. Morse wasn't your typical provincial schoolmaster. He was a man possessed by a passion for the arts, for language, for drama. And crucially, he looked past Baker's rough exterior, his disruptive energy, his reputation as a playground brawler. What Morse saw was a striking physical presence and a voice of extraordinary resonant depth. He understood that Baker's aggression wasn't just misbehavior. It was a frustrated form of expression, a powerful energy that needed a channel. Under Morse's strict but profoundly nurturing guidance, Baker was introduced to the concept of performance. The schoolmaster began casting the young troublemaker in school plays and local Eisteddfod competitions, those wonderful Welsh cultural festivals where talent is celebrated. For Baker, the stage was a revelation. It was a space where his immense physical energy and booming voice weren't reprimanded, weren't seen as a problem, but were applauded, celebrated, given purpose. Morse worked tirelessly with the boy, refining his heavy Rhondda accent just enough to ensure clarity, but crucially, without stripping away its authentic, gravelly texture. He taught Baker how to project, how to command a stage, and most importantly, how to channel that inner anger, that raw intensity, into a controlled, dramatic force. The valleys of coal and clay had provided the raw material, the diamond in the rough, and Glyn Morse began the meticulous process of sculpting it. It's an incredible testament to the power of a single mentor, isn't it? One person who sees potential where others see only trouble. By 1940, the world was a very different place. Great Britain was engulfed in the Second World War. And while war is undeniably disruptive and horrific, for a working-class boy from the valleys, it sometimes opened unexpected doors. Stanley Baker was just 12 years old when his first major breakthrough arrived, an event that truly reads like a piece of Hollywood fiction. Michael Balcon, the distinguished humanitarian, producer, and director from Ealing Studios, was scouting for authentic Welsh children to star in a propaganda feature film. The goal was to bolster wartime morale and highlight the contributions of the British regions to the war effort. The film, eventually titled Undercover and released in 1943, was a drama centered on the Yugoslav guerrilla resistance against Nazi occupation. Glyn Morse, ever the astute mentor, recognized the magnitude of this opportunity. He put forward several of his pupils, including the then 14-year-old Stanley Baker. The producers were specifically seeking a boy to play Peter, a brave young Yugoslav patriot. Baker's screen test was a triumph of naturalism. Imagine a room full of polished, upper-class child actors from London stage schools, all perfectly enunciating their lines. And then there's Baker. He stood out like a jagged piece of anthracite, rugged, intense, and possessing a face that already carried the gravity of an adult, a weight of experience far beyond his years. He landed the role. The experience of filming undercover was transformative in every sense of the word. Suddenly, Baker was no longer confined to the Rhondda. He was stranded in the bustling, cosmopolitan world of London, on wartime film sets, exposed to professional actors, technical crews, and the intricate mechanics of storytelling on a grand scale. He was paid the princely sum of £5 a week, a fortune to a family surviving on Welsh disability allowances. But more importantly than the money, he tasted a world outside the confines of the Rhondda Valley. He realized that acting wasn't just a schoolboy hobby. It was a viable, lucrative profession, a path that could genuinely rescue him and his family from poverty. However, the transition from child actor to professional adult performer is notoriously difficult, and Baker's journey was far from smooth. After filming concluded, he returned to Wales, but the valleys, as much as they had shaped him, could no longer hold his ambition. At the age of 14, he left school permanently. He followed Glyn Morse, who had relocated to Birmingham, continuing his informal apprenticeship under his mentor's watchful eye. Baker secured a position with the Birmingham Repertory Theatre, under the legendary Sir Barry Jackson. The Birmingham Rep was one of the premier training grounds for British theatrical talent, a place that demanded versatility, discipline, and a grueling work ethic. At the Rep, Baker was, to put it mildly, a fish out of water. The British theatre of the 1940s was dominated by the received pronunciation, RP elite, actors who spoke with crystalline aristocratic vowels, exuding an aura of effortless refinement. Baker, with his broad shoulders, heavy jaw, and lingering Welsh cadence, simply did not fit the mold of the romantic juvenile lead. He was relegated to minor roles: soldiers, guards, messengers, thugs. He watched from the wings as more conventional actors took the spotlight, learning, observing, absorbing. Yet, this period was absolutely crucial. He learned the mechanics of classical theater, developed an immense vocal stamina, and grew into his formidable adult frame, eventually standing a broad 6 feet tall. This wasn't wasted time. It was foundational training. In 1946, Baker's nascent career was interrupted by the state. At the age of 18, he was called up for national service, a mandatory military conscription. He joined the Royal Army Service Corps, a deployment that took him to a fractured post-war Germany. For a young man who had known only the Rhondda and the theater, the army was another brutal lesson in human nature, hierarchy, and physical discipline. Baker, naturally, did not particularly enjoy military life, chafing against arbitrary authority. But he excelled in the physical aspects of the service. He became a boxing champion within his regiment, a feat that cemented his reputation as a man not to be trifled with. The army reinforced his natural authority and gave him a first-hand understanding of military structure, camaraderie, and the psychological weight borne by soldiers, knowledge he would later deploy with devastating accuracy on screen, bringing an unparalleled authenticity to his military roles. He was demobilized in 1948 with the rank of corporal, returning to a civilian world with nothing but his discharge papers, a fierce ambition, and an absolute determination to conquer the London stage. Returning to London in 1948, Baker faced a bleak landscape artistically speaking. The British theatrical establishment remained steadfastly bourgeois. The dominant stars of the era, John Gielgud, Laurence Olivier, Michael Redgrave, and Terence Rattigan's preferred leading men, represented an intellectualized, poetic, or drawing-room elegance. Baker, with his boxer's nose, intense dark eyes, and a physical presence that suggested immediate danger, was, quite frankly, an alien entity in this world. He spent months living in squalid London bedsits, auditioning endlessly, and often going hungry. It's a familiar struggle for many aspiring actors, but for Baker, it must have felt particularly acute, given the refined world he was trying to break into. It was during this period of struggle that he found his bedrock, his emotional anchor in life. In 1950, he married Ellen Martin, a talented barmaid and actress. Ellen became his unwavering support, providing emotional stability and an unshakable belief in his talent during those leanest, most challenging years. Their marriage would endure until his death, producing 4 children, Martin, Sally, and twins Glyn and Adam. This personal stability was vital for a man whose professional path was so fraught with uncertainty. Baker's cinematic breakthrough came not as a hero, but in a role that would initially define him, the embodiment of modern, menacing villainy. The British film industry was beginning to shift away from pure wartime escapism toward a gritty, semi-documentary realism, heavily influenced by the American film noir movement. Directors were looking for actors who could portray genuine menace without the theatrical affectations of old-school stage villains. In 1952, director Lewis Gilbert cast Baker in Emergency Call, a tense drama where he played a brutal thug named Danny Rutherford. Baker brought a shocking, visceral energy to the screen. He didn't just play bad. He radiated a predatory, unpredictable violence that made audiences genuinely uncomfortable. It was raw, unsettling, and utterly compelling. This performance caught the eye of one of the most important figures in British cinema, director Raoul Walsh, who was in the UK filming an adventure epic for Warner Brothers titled Captain Horatio Hornblower, R.N. 1951, starring Gregory Peck. Baker was cast in a minor but memorable role as Mr. Harrison, a rugged seaman. Working on a massive Hollywood-financed production solidified Baker's desire to break away from the constraints of low-budget British studio films. He saw the potential for a larger canvas. The true defining turning point of this era arrived in 1953, when the visionary director Guy Green cast Baker in The Cruel Sea, an adaptation of Nicholas Montserrat's best-selling wartime novel. The film, produced by Ealing Studios, focused on the horrific psychological and physical toll of the Battle of the Atlantic. Baker was cast against type as First Lieutenant James Bennett, a pompous, deeply insecure, and ultimately cowardly officer who uses a tyrannical attitude to mask his incompetence before being invalided off the ship. Baker's performance was a masterclass in psychological disintegration. He avoided the cliché of the mustache-twirling coward, choosing instead to portray Bennett as a tragic, deeply flawed human being buckling under the immense pressure of command. It was nuanced, painful, and incredibly human. The Cruel Sea was a massive critical and commercial success, launching Baker into the front rank of British character actors. He was no longer just a tough guy. He was an actor with range. Recognizing his unique utility as a physical antagonist, the British studio system, in a way, pigeonholed him. They utilized Baker as the premier screen villain of the mid-1950s. In 1954, he starred alongside Alan Ladd in Hell Below Zero, an action-adventure set on a whaling factory ship in the Antarctic. Baker played Eric Bland, a treacherous, murderous executive. During filming, Baker performed his own stunts, engaging in a brutal climactic fistfight with Ladd on simulated cracking ice floes. He repeated this antagonistic success in The Night of the Castle and Passage Home, 1955, where he played a bullying, manipulative shipsmate named Shearing. He was the man audiences loved to hate, a villain you could believe in, a force of nature. By 1956, Stanley Baker had become a household name, but he was dangerously close to being typecast as a one-dimensional heavy. He had proven he could intimidate, punch, and snarl better than anyone in the business. However, Baker was dissatisfied. He knew he possessed the range to play complex, morally ambiguous protagonists. He wasn't content to be just the villain. He wanted to change the definition of what a British leading man could look like. He wanted to bring the working-class reality of the Rhondda Valley, his authentic self, to the forefront of global cinema, not just as a supporting character, but as the central figure. The mid-1950s saw the birth of the angry young man movement in British theatre and literature. Spearheaded by John Osborne's Look Back in Anger, audiences were rejecting the polite, upper-class conventions of the past and demanding art that reflected the raw, gritty reality of post-war working-class Britain. In cinema, Stanley Baker became the physical vanguard of this cultural revolution. He didn't achieve this through theatrical angst, but through a series of muscular, hard-boiled film roles that redefined masculinity on screen. He wasn't just angry, he was powerful. The catalyst for this transformation was his collaboration with the blacklisted American director Cy Enfield. Enfield had fled to Britain to escape the anti-communist McCarthy witch hunts in Hollywood, a dark chapter in American history. He found in Baker a kindred spirit, a man who understood alienation, social friction, and raw power. Together, they would make some of the most influential British films of the late 1950s. This partnership was crucial, a meeting of minds that allowed Baker to truly blossom. Their first collaboration was Hell Drivers, 1957, a film that remains a towering masterpiece of British realism and action cinema. Baker played Tom Yateley, an ex-convict trying to go straight by taking a job as a truck driver for a corrupt gravel-hauling company, Hollitz. The drivers are paid by the piece, forcing them to drive at suicidal speeds over poorly maintained country roads in heavy, 10-ton tipper trucks. The film was an unvarnished look at industrial exploitation, masculine rivalry, and working-class desperation. It was a brutal, honest portrayal of a specific segment of society, something rarely seen on British screens at the time. Baker's performance was nothing short of revolutionary. He was brooding, muscular, and intensely focused, presenting a British equivalent to Marlon Brando or James Dean, but stripped of any teenage vulnerability. He was a mature, dangerous man operating in a dog-eat-dog world. His chemistry with his co-star, Patrick McGoohan, who played the psychotic lead driver, Red, resulted in an on-screen rivalry of unmatched intensity. Hell Drivers featured a supporting cast of future British icons, including Sean Connery, David McCallum, and Gordon Jackson. But Baker was the undisputed sun around which the film rotated. He proved definitively that he could carry a film as a charismatic, albeit deeply flawed, anti-hero. He wasn't just a tough guy. Baker and Enfield immediately capitalized on this success with Sea Fury in 1958, another muscular industrial drama. This time, Baker played Abel Enterprise, a veteran tugboat captain engaged in the perilous competitive business of ocean salvage off the coast of Spain. The film combined realistic, salt-sprayed action with a tense, psychological love triangle. Baker brought a weary, weathered dignity to the role, demonstrating a capacity for romantic tension that critics had previously doubted he possessed. He was expanding his range, proving his versatility. During this period, Baker also began a fruitful relationship with director Joseph Losey, another brilliant American filmmaker blacklisted by Hollywood. Losey recognized that Baker's physical presence could be used to explore complex intellectual and psychological themes, not just brute force. Their first collaboration was Blind Date, in 1959, released as Chance Meeting in the U.S. Baker played Inspector Morgan, a gruff working-class police detective tasked with solving the murder of a wealthy woman. Morgan is a man with a massive chip on his shoulder, operating within a police force and a high-society social structure that views him with aristocratic disdain. Baker played Morgan not as a polished Sherlock Holmes, but as a dog sniffing out a scent, sweaty, relentless, and plagued by class-based resentment. The film was a brilliant razor-sharp critique of the British class system, masked as a film noir. Baker's performance was widely praised for its depth and psychological realism, proving that his talent extended far beyond physical action. He could convey inner turmoil and social commentary with just a look, a gesture. By the close of the 1950s, Stanley Baker had successfully broken the mold of the British cinematic establishment. He had banished the polite drawing-room hero and replaced him with the sweat-stained, hard-working, morally complex modern man. He was now a top box office draw, respected by critics and adored by working-class audiences who finally saw a reflection of themselves on the silver screen. He wasn't just an actor, he was a symbol. As the 1960s dawned, Stanley Baker had reached the zenith of his acting powers. Yet, he was acutely aware of the structural limitations of the British film industry. Actors were traditionally treated as contract laborers at the mercy of studio executives who pocketed the lion's share of profits and dictated artistic choices. Baker, with his innate working-class independence and sharp business acumen, wanted autonomy. He desired control over the scripts he performed, the directors he hired, and the distribution of the final product. He sought to become an auteur producer-actor, modeled after Hollywood titans like Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster, men who took control of their own destinies. In 1959, Baker formed his own independent production company, Diamond Films. This move was a gamble, a significant risk, but Baker was convinced that the global film market was changing. Audiences wanted international scope, high production values, and gritty realism. His first major project under this new ethos was The Angry Hills, 1959, directed by Robert Aldrich, which allowed him to study the mechanics of international co-productions firsthand. He was learning the business from the ground up, not just the acting. Baker continued his streak of hard-boiled brilliance with The Criminal, 1960, again directed by Joseph Losey. The film is widely regarded as one of the finest British prison dramas ever made. Baker played Johnny Banyan, an unrepentant old-school underworld boss who plans a major racetrack robbery while inside, only to find the outside world altered upon his release. Baker's portrayal of Banyan was terrifyingly authentic. He didn't glamorize the gangster. Instead, he showed him as a professional criminal trapped in a violent, claustrophobic subculture. The film featured a jazz score by John Dankworth and was heavily censored upon release due to its realistic depiction of prison violence and systemic corruption. Baker's performance solidified his reputation as the premier tough guy actor of European cinema, but a tough guy with depth, with a dark, unsettling realism. In 1961, Baker achieved immense international recognition with his role in the Hollywood blockbuster The Guns of Navarone, directed by J. Lee Thompson and starring Gregory Peck, David Niven, and Anthony Quinn. Baker was cast as Private Butcher Brown, a war-weary, traumatized demolition expert from London who has lost the will to kill but is forced into a suicide mission to destroy massive German coastal guns. Baker's performance provided the emotional and moral core of the film. Amidst the grand adventure and explosive set pieces, his character represented the devastating psychological toll of prolonged combat. He was the human cost of war. The film was a colossal global success, earning multiple Academy Award nominations and ensuring that Baker's face and name were known to audiences across North America. He was now a global star. But instead of capitalizing on this success by moving to Hollywood, as many would have done, Baker chose to invest his growing wealth and leverage back into independent British cinema. This was a deliberate choice, a commitment to his roots and his vision. He reunited with Joseph Losey for Eva, 1962, a dark, psychological drama filmed on location in Venice and Rome. Baker played Tyvian Jones, a fraudulent Welsh writer who becomes obsessively, destructively infatuated with a high-class courtesan, played by the incomparable Jean Moreau. Eva was a radical departure for Baker. It stripped away his tough guy armor, revealing a man who was weak, vain, and emotionally pathetic. Though the film was plagued by studio re-editing disputes, Baker's performance showcased a staggering emotional range that shattered any remaining notions that he was merely an action star. He proved he could play vulnerable, even despicable, with equal conviction. He returned to safer commercial territory with In the French Style, 1963, a romantic drama starring Jean Seberg, before embarking on the most ambitious, risky, and ultimately triumphant venture of his entire life, a film that would immortalize his name in cinema history. This, of course, was Zulu. The genesis of Zulu, 1964, lies in the deep creative partnership between Stanley Baker and director Cy Enfield. Enfield had come across an article detailing the Battle of Rorke's Drift, fought in January 1879 during the Anglo-Zulu War. In this battle, a tiny British garrison of just over 150 soldiers, many of them sick and wounded, successfully defended a remote missionary station against a relentless onslaught of over 4,000 disciplined Zulu warriors. It was an epic story of survival, courage, and military strategy, but one that had been largely forgotten by the public. Baker saw the immense cinematic potential of the story. Crucially, he did not want to make a jingoistic, old-fashioned piece of British imperial propaganda, the kind that was common at the time. He wanted to make an anti-war film that respected both sides, one that highlighted the horrific absurdity of colonial warfare, while honoring the courage of the individual men caught in the crossfire. This was a truly progressive vision for the time. Baker's company, Diamond Films, teamed up with Paramount Pictures to finance the production on a scale never before attempted for a British-led film. He was putting his money, his reputation, and his creative vision on the line. Baker cast himself against his usual type. Instead of playing a rugged working-class rebel, he chose the role of Lieutenant John Chard of the Royal Engineers. Chard was an aristocratic, methodical, and thoroughly conventional officer who assumed command of the garrison purely by virtue of seniority, having received his commission 3 months earlier than the charismatic infantry officer, Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead. It was a subtle but important choice, showing his willingness to inhabit different kinds of characters. To play Bromhead, Baker made a casting decision that would alter the course of cinema history. He chose a young, completely unknown London stage actor named Michael Caine. The studio executives were horrified. Caine was a working-class Cockney, and they believed he could not possibly play an aristocratic officer. But Baker stood his ground, insisting on Caine's casting and recognizing the brilliant contrast Caine's icy, elegant performance would provide against his own gruff, pragmatic portrayal of Chard. This wasn't just a good casting decision, it was a visionary one, showcasing Baker's incredible eye for talent and understanding of screen dynamics. Production on Zulu began in 1963 on location in the breathtaking national parks of Natal, South Africa. The logistics were a nightmare. Baker, acting as both lead actor and chief producer, faced immense challenges: shifting weather, disease, complex animal handling, and the ever-present political tensions of apartheid South Africa. But Baker, true to his character, insisted on hiring thousands of local Zulu people as extras and actors, ensuring they were paid equal wages to white extras. A revolutionary move that drew severe scrutiny from the South African authorities. He formed a deep bond of mutual respect with Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the future Zulu political leader, who portrayed his own great-grandfather, King Cetshwayo, in the film. This wasn't just about filmmaking. It was about social justice, about respect. Zulu was released in the United Kingdom on January 22, 1964, exactly 85 years after the actual battle. It was an instant, monumental sensation. The film was a masterpiece of tension, cinematography, and sound design. The driving rhythm of the Zulu war chants, contrasted with the British soldiers singing the Welsh anthem, Men of Harlech, created an indelible cinematic experience, a powerful clash of cultures and sounds that resonated deeply with audiences. Baker's performance as Chard was masterful. He portrayed a man who grows from a bureaucratic engineer into a desperate tactical commander, visibly aging and breaking under the horror of the slaughter. The final scenes of the film, where Chard and Bromhead look upon the field of dead bodies with profound exhaustion and disgust rather than triumphant joy, encapsulated Baker's anti-war vision. It wasn't about glory, it was about the terrible cost. Zulu became one of the highest-grossing British films of all time, a staple of television broadcasting for decades, and the definitive achievement of Stanley Baker's career. It's a film that still holds up today, a testament to its timeless themes and powerful execution. The immense financial and critical triumph of Zulu transformed Stanley Baker from a movie star into a powerful media tycoon. He was now a wealthy man, moving in elite social circles, counting among his close friends senior politicians like the Labour Party leader Harold Wilson. Yet, Baker never forgot his roots. He used his wealth and influence to invest heavily in the British entertainment infrastructure, seeking to democratize the media and create opportunities for regional talent. This wasn't just about making money. It was about giving back, about fostering the kind of talent that he himself once was. In the mid-1960s, Baker expanded his business empire. He became a founding director of Rorke Television, HTV, which won the independent television franchise for Wales and the West of England in 1967. Baker was passionate about HTV. He wanted a television station that truly reflected Welsh culture, language, and life, breaking the London-centric dominance of British broadcasting. He poured immense time and energy into the corporate management of HTV, producing documentaries, cultural programs, and regional dramas. He understood the power of local voices, the importance of seeing your own culture reflected on screen, something that was often overlooked by the national broadcasters. Despite his heavy corporate responsibilities, Baker continued to act, though his choice of roles became more eclectic and international. In 1965, he starred in Sands of the Kalahari, again directed by Cy Enfield. The film was a brutal survival drama about a group of plane crash survivors in the African desert. Baker played Mike Bain, an alcoholic, broken man fighting for survival against both nature and a psychopathic fellow survivor, played by Stuart Whitman. The film was physically grueling to shoot, and while it didn't match the commercial success of Zulu, it remains a cult classic of survivalist cinema, showcasing Baker's enduring commitment to challenging roles. Baker's acting style began to evolve to match his status as a mature elder statesman of the screen. In 1967, he gave an extraordinary performance in Accident, his third and final collaboration with director Joseph Losey and screenwriter Harold Pinter. The film was a chilling intellectual examination of the sexual rivalries and existential angst among Oxford academics. Baker played Charlie, a successful, charismatic, but deeply cynical university don who engages in an affair with a young student. Baker's performance was stripped of all physical violence. Instead, the menace was entirely psychological and verbal, conveyed through sharp Pinteresque dialogue and subtle shifts of expression. It proved that Baker was one of the most versatile actors of his generation, capable of transitioning from action epics to high art cinema. He wasn't just a physical presence. He was an intellectual one, capable of conveying profound internal struggles. As the 1960s gave way to the 1970s, the British film industry entered a catastrophic economic decline due to the withdrawal of American studio financing. Baker's independent production ventures suffered heavy financial blows. He starred in several European co-productions, such as the Italian giallo film A Lizard in a Woman's Skin, 1971, directed by Lucio Fulci, and the action film The Last Grenade, 1970. These were often commercial necessities, but he maintained his commitment to working. Recognizing the shift in audience habits, Baker increasingly turned his attention to television. He starred in several high-profile BBC productions, including a magnificent adaptation of Shakespeare's The Changeling, 1974, and The Perfect Friday, 1970, a slick caper film he produced himself. Baker was one of the few film stars of his era who openly embraced television, recognizing it as the future of mass storytelling, a medium that could reach into every home. He was a pioneer, not afraid to adapt and innovate. By the mid-1970s, Stanley Baker's relentless work ethic and heavy lifestyle began to take a severe toll on his health. He was a lifelong heavy smoker, consuming up to 60 cigarettes a day, and a man who lived life with immense, exhausting intensity. He was a regular fixture in the high-stakes world of showbiz charity, a passionate supporter of Welsh rugby, and a dedicated family man who traveled constantly between his corporate offices in Cardiff, his home in London, and film sets across the globe. He was burning the candle at both ends, living life to its absolute fullest. In 1975, Baker began experiencing persistent chest pains and a chronic cough. Initially dismissing it as the occupational hazard of a heavy smoker, he eventually sought medical advice. The diagnosis was devastating. He was suffering from advanced lung cancer. Characteristically, Baker met the news with the same stoic, unyielding courage that defined his screen personas. He refused to retreat from public life or indulge in self-pity. He continued to work, planning future television productions for HTV and undergoing grueling courses of treatment with quiet dignity. He was, until the very end, the rugged icon. In early 1976, it was announced that Stanley Baker was to be awarded a knighthood in Prime Minister Harold Wilson's resignation honors list. The news was met with immense joy across Wales and the wider entertainment industry. It was a fitting recognition of his extraordinary contributions to British cinema, his pioneering work in television, and his lifelong championship of Welsh culture. He was to become Sir Stanley Baker. It was a beautiful moment, a culmination of a lifetime of achievement, a boy from the valleys reaching the highest echelons of British society. Tragically, Baker would never walk through the gates of Buckingham Palace to receive the accolade from the Queen. His health deteriorated rapidly. The cancer spread to his bones, leaving him in immense physical agony. In May 1976, seeking respite and specialized treatment, he traveled to the town of Malaga in Spain, a country he had grown to love during his many film shoots. On June 28, 1976, in a hospital in Malaga, Sir Stanley Baker closed his eyes for the final time. He was just 48 years old. His death sent a shockwave of grief through the international film community and caused a period of national mourning in his native Wales. A life of such intensity extinguished far too soon. Following his wishes, Baker was cremated in Spain, and his ashes were brought back to the landscape that had formed him. In a private, deeply moving ceremony, his ashes were scattered from the summit of the rock overlooking his birthplace of Ferndale in the Rhondda Valley. The boy who had escaped the pits through the power of his voice and presence had returned to the earth of his ancestors, completing a remarkable, full-circle journey. The legacy of Sir Stanley Baker is immense and multi-layered, truly a testament to his impact. First, there's what we can call the avant-garde masculinity. Before Sean Connery's James Bond, before Michael Caine's Harry Palmer, or Albert Finney's Arthur Seaton, Stanley Baker brought the raw, uncompromising reality of the British working-class man to global cinema. He destroyed the monopoly of the upper-class polite hero, proving that grit, sweat, and physical authority could be magnetic and high artistic. He paved the way for a whole generation of working-class actors and heroes. He showed that authenticity could be compelling, that strength didn't have to be refined. Then, there's the masterpiece of Zulu. As the creative and financial driving force behind Zulu, he gifted the world an enduring masterpiece of action cinema that remains a benchmark for epic storytelling and historical respect. It's not just a war film, it's a profound statement about the human condition under duress, and a remarkably balanced portrayal of a colonial conflict, especially for its era. He was also the cultural democratizer. Through his pioneering leadership of HTV, Rorke television, he helped establish a robust independent broadcasting structure that empowered regional voices and preserved the Welsh cultural identity for future generations. He understood that media wasn't just for London, but for the people, for the diverse cultures that make up a nation. And finally, the actor's director. His brave collaborations with blacklisted American directors like Cy Enfield and Joseph Losey produced a body of work, films like Hell Drivers, The Criminal, and Accident, that challenged social conventions and pushed the boundaries of cinematic realism. He gave a platform to artists who were otherwise marginalized, and together they created films that were ahead of their time, gritty and intellectually stimulating. Sir Stanley Baker was, in every sense of the word, a man of magnificent contradictions. A working-class valley boy who became a knighted media tycoon, a screen thug who possessed an intellectual appreciation for complex drama, a physically imposing alpha male who was unafraid to show vulnerability and moral decay on screen. He remains an immortal titan of British cultural history, a piece of unyielding Rhondda anthracite that shone with a brilliant, dangerous light. His life reminds us that true strength often comes from unexpected places, and that authenticity, when wielded with vision and determination, can change the world. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the extraordinary life of Sir Stanley Baker. I hope you've learned something new about this remarkable, often overlooked figure in cinematic history.